My name is Kunal Patel. I'm with the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. I am a senior research analyst.
Very excited to have Kunal back on the program. We've talked to him before about some of the studies that come out involving energy, and we do have a new study that looks like came out just a couple days ago, if not, March 28th, yesterday, involving the Texas oil and gas activity strengthens further, says Dallas Fed Energy Survey. So we'd like to just explore that a little bit further. So just kind of maybe a state of Texas oil and gas. We'll start there and then go into the more specifics of the report, if you would.
Definitely. So let me give you a little bit of background about the survey itself, and then I'll go through like the main headlines in it. So every quarter, the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, or also known as the Dallas Fed, we publish the Dallas Fed Energy Survey. It's a survey of upstream oil and gas firms in our district, and our district includes Texas and parts of New Mexico and Louisiana, and parts of Louisiana. And so this past survey, we had 150 different firms respond to our survey. And generally in the past, we've had between 135 firms and 150 firms. It's available on our website. The first release was back in the first quarter of 2016, and again, it's quarterly. The main headline for this recent survey is that activity in the oil and gas sector grew vigorously over the past quarter. We have a variety of quarter-over-quarter indexes, and the main highlights was that firms reported continued growth, improved outlooks, and modest increases in employment. To provide an idea on growth, our activity index came at the highest level since the first quarter of 2017. And this expansion is leading to increased employment, but it's also pushing up wages and other costs for firms.
Pushing up wages and other costs. We've heard so much about streamlining and efficiency and that sort of thing. And, here we're talking about pushing up wages and costs. Is things catching up? Or talk to me a little bit about the pushing up the wages and the costs. Do you know what's driving that?
So definitely when we look at the employment indexes, they were all positive this quarter. And a lot of times when they're positive, it means expansion. So it's pointing to more jobs, longer hours, and potentially increased pay. Right now, there's a variety of, we have a section of comments which come from the executives on our survey. And some of them are talking about labor shortages. Some of them are talking about trouble finding workers. And the indexes essentially just suggest that there are wage pressures, so wages may be going up. And then on the cost side, as many of us have heard, there's the potential for higher oilfield services costs. So our indexes show that the input cost for oilfield services has actually jumped significantly, and then the index for prices received for these firms only rose moderately. So there's, it may be that the oilfield services firms, their costs are rising faster than the prices that they're able to push on to their E&P services. But in the end, there is some kind of pressure on cost, and this is probably on the oilfield services side and also on the E&P side.
Well, we've been tracking for the past probably year and a half is we've noticed the change in the overall employment from, technology's obviously changed a lot of the different workers that you see at the wellhead. There's a lot more engineers involved, a lot more safety compliance. It seems like a lot of the energy worker has changed so much. This brings a whole new layer to that I had not really thought about, which is the wages. And how that probably, with the new workers that have come in, have probably rippled into, where we have impacted some of the wages and that people have seen. Have you guys talked or noticed that at all when you take a look at the jobs, how much they have changed within the industry, or are you guys mostly focused on the raw numbers?
A little bit more on the raw numbers. I mean, mostly these are indexes, and firms pretty much say that, hey, look, have our wages been going up, or have they been going down, or have they stayed the same? And so more firms reporting that the wages are going up rather than going down. And so our index comes in positive quarter over quarter. There definitely is, like you said, there's a lot of innovation. A lot of these firms kind of buckled down, when prices came down. And now that prices are up, they've continued to keep the innovation. They have continued to add additional technology. But the wages may be just a little bit of a story of the fact that, like, right now they're in expansion. Unemployment is really low in the oil patch, especially in the Permian Basin. So some of these things may be impacting the indexes. It's important to note that most of our firms, again, these are guys in Texas, so these are in the Permian Basin mostly. And so that may also be potentially impacting it.
And that was my next question. We have Kunal Patel with us, Federal Reserve Dallas, the Dallas Fed, talking about the Texas oil and gas activity study that was just recently done. And the next question I had was, I was going to ask you about the Permian Basin or the Eagle Ford, if you had any specifics when it comes down to the different shale plays. The Haynesville, I know, is down there as well. But it sounds like the Permian is where the most of this information came out of, which makes sense because that's where the most of the activity is. Do we have numbers in terms of what the dollar figure is looking good at for price of oil? Have you got any specifics that people kind of bullet point look for when it comes to these different shale plays?
So we did ask a question in this past quarter, and we asked, what WTI oil price does your firm need to profitably drill a new well? And the ranges, so we broke it down into regions and then got the average. So the average of the different regions ranged from $47 to $55 per barrel. Again, it's important to understand the question is essentially just asking what price or what oil price do you need to profitably drill a new well. And at the bottom of the range, the Permian Basin came in at the bottom range, particularly Permian Midland. For this year, as an aggregate, Permian came in at $50 a barrel, and that's a little bit higher than when we asked the same question last year. And then in the Q1 2017, it was $48. It's moved up to $50. Some of the other basins, we don't have as many responses. If you think about oil rigs right now, the Permian Basin has about, let's say, 55% of, maybe 55, 56% of oil rigs in the U.S. And many of these other regions, they just don't have as many rigs there, which means that there's less operators there. And so we don't have as many responses. For your readers, maybe the Bakken came in at 50, but there was less responses on our end. The main thing is that, most of the firms right now, the vast majority of the ones that are in the survey can profitably drill a new well at current prices. We use the WTI spot price for March 23rd because that's when we ran the analysis. Then spot price was $66 per barrel, and roughly 88% of responses were below that. And so a significant portion of our survey respondents are able to profitably drill a new well at current prices. This past quarter, we did get 65 different firms responding to the survey for this specific question.
Was there anything in terms of natural gas that was looked at all, or was this primarily just crude oil?
It was primarily crude oil.
Okay. And then the next question I had for you was rig counts. This is probably outside the well of what we're talking about here. It's more or less just, I'm hearing some rumblings of, should we reinvent rig counts, how we're looking at them, and do they really accurately portray what they used to portray in the past? Has there been any discussion about kind of the evolution of how we look at rig counts at all from the Fed Dallas, or is it still pretty much the old criteria still works pretty good?
So from the Fed Dallas, it's something that we have particularly discussed, or it's not really part of our survey. I can say outside of that, there are specific organizations that have looked into thinking about it a different way. I mean, it's generally a given that today firms are more innovative. They're able to drill wells faster. They're able to get more oil from new wells compared to maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And so, for example, Anacarm has their own way of thinking of, right now rig counts aren't as high as it was in 2014, but once you add in all the innovation, it may be actually higher than 2014. Within the Fed, we haven't actually come up with a metric for that. But again, it has a lot of moving parts, and It just depends on how you see it. It is clear that today firms are able to drill wells faster, that they're able to get more per well, but it's not something that we've looked at in the survey or outside that.
But at least we're having conversations about it, which is a good sign because, and it sounds like you're hearing the same thing that I'm hearing in the Bakken and in the Niobrara and some of the other plays, that the discussion is being had, that the old method just isn't 100% like it used to be. It's only coming in at 70, 80, 90%. How can we get it? How can we tweak this chemistry set that we've had that's worked for so long? So it is, but you kind of, I'm speaking on for you, I guess, by saying what I heard was that people are having the conversations and there might be a change coming down in the next few years, huh?
The biggest thing and this is more of my personal view, is that the biggest challenge with changing it up is, like, if you can do like different types of rigs. You know, like today they claim that today the rigs are a lot more powerful, right? Because they have to frack wells, they have to drill further laterals, they have to pump more sand. The biggest thing is the methodology, and so whose methodology is correct in terms of, because everyone can count rigs. In terms of figuring out how do you wait over time, that's where the methodology comes in, and that leads to a discussion. So
there you go, folks. There's a $1 million idea waiting for someone out there, some smart economist that can figure out a new way to, I mean, up in the Bakken, I heard one of the greatest conversations at a local level, which is they're trying to figure out if they re-look at how they do population projection, because they have it based on sales tax. Well, Amazon has totally redone that whole thing, the whole online shopping, to where, you know, using the local sales tax as a methodology for population projection, that's just not working as well as it used to be. So there's a lot of different new methodologies being discussed, and you're right, trying to figure out the best chemistry set, the best recipe for this soup. It's going to take a little time, and it might, you know, there might even be one or two that don't work before the methodology works out. So anyway, we're getting to speculation land. I didn't want to get too far out there. I just wanted to find out if some conversations were happening, because I've been hearing it all over the place, and it sounds like they are happening. So let's get back to the survey here real quick. Kunal Patel with the Federal Reserve Dallas, talking about the oil and gas activity down in Texas, where they just did a study. So as we kind of wrap up here, anything that we missed, anything you want to reiterate, anything that we should bullet point here? I'll kind of give you a snapshot to kind of give a summary of what you think the people in Texas and even some of the other shale plays would want to know from this report.
I mean, the main thing is that to highlight, activity in the oil and gas sector. It's growing. We can say it's expanding robustly. It's vigorous. It's definitely clear that the activity is expanding. Oil and gas production is going up. For the average person, there is demand for employment, and there is some talk of labor shortages or just a need for more workers in the oil patch. We did ask a question around whether firms saw their number of employees at their company changing in 2018 versus 2017. 51% said that they looked to increase headcount in 2018. However, most of it was increased slightly. Let me look at the exact numbers. About 40% said increased slightly, 11% said increased significantly. Most of the demand is really on the services side, because these are the guys that are out in the field. The main thing is that industries continue to expand. They're able to profitably drill wells. There is demand for employment. A little bit more on the services side, but there were some E&P guys saying, we're still looking for employees. So definitely a good time to be in the oil patch.